Winter descended on Westfield Academy with merciless intensity, blanketing the prestigious campus in snow that glittered beneath the moonlight. Inside the cavernous library, shadows danced across century-old books as the wind howled against leaded glass windows, a lonely melody in the emptiness of night. In a world where worth is so often measured by titles and bank accounts, the truest character is revealed not in moments of recognition, but in those quiet instances when we believe no one is watching. Sometimes, the most profound connections form in the spaces between visibility and invisibility, between those who are seen too much and those who aren't seen at all. At Westfield Academy, where legacies were built and futures secured with hefty donations and family names, this is how our story begins with Raymond Jenkins, a 58-year-old janitor whose calloused hands had maintained the school's gleaming floors for 27 years. With his faded blue uniform and quiet dignity, he was about to discover that kindness, even when offered in secret, has a way of returning in the most unexpected forms. Raymond Jenkins, 58 years old, was a janitor at Westfield Academy, an institution that proudly called itself the cradle of tomorrow's leaders. His weathered face bore the map of a difficult life: crow's feet around kind eyes, a crease between his brows from years of concentration, and a slight downward turn to his mouth that spoke of endured hardships. His uniform, though meticulously clean, had faded from navy to a softer blue that matched the winter sky at dusk. The name patch on his chest read simply Ray, a small acknowledgement of his humanity in halls where students rarely looked twice in his direction. 20 years ago, Ray had been Raymond Jenkins, operations manager at Hartwell Manufacturing. He'd worn pressed shirts and ties, led a team of 30, and brought home enough to put his daughter through her first year of college. His desk had displayed her photo, Melissa, brilliant and determined, the first Jenkins to attend university. Their modest home had hummed with possibility. Then came the factory closure, the economy's downturn. Raymond had watched helplessly as his savings dwindled, as Melissa's tuition became an impossible mountain. The final blow came when his wife Marion was diagnosed with aggressive lung cancer. Despite never having smoked a day in her life, the disease claimed her with devastating efficiency, leaving behind astronomical medical bills and a broken family. Melissa had dropped out of college to work multiple jobs, insisting her father accept her help. The weight of that sacrifice still bent Ray's shoulders decades later, though Melissa had eventually finished her degree at night while working days. Now she taught elementary school in another state called Weekly, and never once made him feel he'd failed her. Now Ray's days started at 4:30 a.m. in the basement apartment he rented from Mrs. Abernathy, an elderly widow who appreciated his handyman skills more than his monthly payments. He arrived at Westfield by 5:15 a.m., long before the 80,000 per year students stirred in their dormitories. His morning routine never varied: check the boilers, sweep the main entrance, ensure the headmaster's office gleamed before the administrative staff arrived at 7:30. The students rarely acknowledged his existence. Occasionally, a teacher would nod hello or thank him for cleaning a particularly difficult mess. Most days, Ray moved through the academy like a ghost, witnessing snippets of privilege he could scarcely comprehend. Students complaining about family vacations to destinations he couldn't pronounce, casually discussing summer internships arranged by parental connections, lamenting the ancient technology of last year's laptop models. The financial aid students were different. Ray recognized them instantly: their careful preservation of supplies, their longer hours in the library, their strategic avoidance of conversations about holiday plans or weekend activities. Ray kept extra granola bars in his cleaning cart for those he noticed skipping meals. He'd leave them casually, as if forgotten, near where these students studied. Last week, he'd overheard Professor Harrington berating a scholarship student whose second-hand uniform had frayed at the cuffs. That night, Ray had stayed 2 hours after his shift to mend his own spare uniform pants, leaving them anonymously in the student's locker with a note that simply read, "Extra pair I don't need anymore." Every evening, after the final bell, Ray would methodically clean each classroom, collecting forgotten textbooks, some worth more than his weekly salary, and placing them in the lost and found. He'd wipe away coffee rings from expensive desks, vacuum between the rows of chairs, and polish the brass fixtures until they reflected his tired face back at him. "One more year," he'd whisper to himself as he locked the supply closet each night. One more year, and I'll have enough saved for Melissa's wedding. But he'd been saying this for several years now, the financial goal always shifting just beyond his reach. Tonight would be different, though Ray had no way of knowing it as he pushed his cleaning cart down the silent corridor, snow gathering against the windows like secrets waiting to be told. It was on a particularly bitter Thursday evening in January that everything changed. The campus had emptied earlier than usual, as news of an approaching blizzard sent students and faculty rushing home. The temperature had plummeted to single digits, and wind gusts rattled the historic windows of the main academic building. Ray worked methodically through his evening checklist, moving from classroom to classroom with practiced efficiency, knowing he'd need to finish quickly to catch the last bus before public transportation shut down for the storm. The library was always his final stop, a cavernous room with soaring ceilings, oak bookshelves and leather chairs that cost more than Ray's monthly rent. Usually empty by this hour, tonight Ray noticed something unusual as he pushed his cart through the heavy doors. A small figure hunched over a desk in the far corner, partially hidden by stacks of books. A boy, perhaps 15 or 16, had fallen asleep amid scattered papers and open textbooks. His uniform blazer was draped over the back of his chair, and he wore only the thin white shirt and school tie, clearly inadequate against the building's dropping temperature as the heating system powered down for the night. The boy's face, relaxed in sleep, looked troubled even in repose. Dark circles beneath his eyes, a furrowed brow, and a thinness that spoke of missed meals. Ray approached quietly, noting the complexity of the mathematics texts surrounding the student. Post-it notes covered with equations filled the margins of the books, and a half-finished problem set lay beneath the boy's hand. Ray recognized him vaguely, a new student who had arrived mid-semester, quiet and serious. Unlike most Westfield students, he carried a worn backpack rather than the designer bags favored by his peers. "Hey, son," Ray said softly, touching the boy's shoulder. "Library's closing. Storm's coming." The boy didn't stir, his breathing deep and even in the exhausted sleep of someone who had pushed himself too far. Ray glanced at his watch. 8:42 p.m. His bus left at 9:03. If he left now, he'd make it to the stop with 5 minutes to spare. Ray looked again at the sleeping student, then at the windows where snow now pelted against the glass with increasing urgency. The temperature gauge on the wall showed the building's heat had indeed cycled down to its overnight setting. The boy shivered slightly in his sleep. Without hesitation, Ray slipped off his work jacket, the heavy canvas one with the insulated lining he'd purchased second-hand 3 winters ago. It wasn't fancy, and it carried the faint smell of cleaning products and the fried egg sandwich he'd had for lunch, but it was warm. Carefully moving with the gentleness that had once tucked his own daughter into bed, Ray draped the jacket over the boy's shoulders. The boy stirred slightly, mumbling something unintelligible before settling back into sleep. Ray noticed a prescription bottle peeking from the backpack. Something for asthma, the kind of medication he knew was expensive. He also spotted a bus schedule similar to his own, confirming his suspicion that this wasn't one of the typical Westfield students whose chauffeurs waited at their beck and call. Ray straightened up, feeling the building's chill immediately through his thin uniform shirt. He'd have to hurry now to make the bus. He scribbled a quick note on the back of a cleaning schedule. "Return jacket to maintenance office when done. Stay warm. Ray." He placed it where the boy would see it upon waking, then quietly began gathering his supplies. As Ray turned to leave, his elbow knocked a book to the floor. Bending to retrieve it, he noticed a name written in careful script inside the cover, Alex Chen. Below it was a phone number and a note. "If found, please call. Scholarship depends on this textbook." Ray placed the book carefully beside the sleeping boy, positioning it so it wouldn't fall again. He took one last look at the student, now breathing more comfortably beneath the warmth of the jacket, and felt a familiar ache, the same one he'd felt watching Melissa fall asleep over her homework years ago. "Sleep tight, kid," Ray whispered. "Whatever you're working so hard for, I hope you get it." With that, Ray pushed his cart toward the exit, bracing himself for the cold walk to the bus stop. He'd miss his jacket tonight, but he had an old sweater at home that would have to do until tomorrow. Some things were simply more important than comfort or convenience, a lesson Ray had learned long ago and never forgotten. As the library door closed behind him, Ray couldn't know that his simple act of kindness had been witnessed by eyes he never saw, or that by morning, His life would change in ways he couldn't imagine. 2 days after the blizzard, Westfield Academy resumed its normal rhythm. The snow had been cleared from the walkways, classes were back in session, and Ray had returned to his invisible routine, minus one work jacket. He hadn't seen the boy. Alex he now knew since that night, though he'd checked the library several times. The jacket hadn't been returned to the maintenance office, but Ray wasn't concerned. If the kid needed it, he was welcome to it. Ray was polishing the trophy case outside the headmaster's office when he heard his name, a rare occurrence that immediately caught his attention. Mr. Jenkins. The school secretary, Mrs. Pembroke, stood in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically flustered. "Headmaster Warner would like to see you right away." Ray's stomach tightened. In 27 years, he had been called to the headmaster's office exactly twice. Once when he'd discovered a water leak that saved priceless first editions in the rare bookroom, and once when budget cuts had nearly eliminated his position before a last-minute endowment saved the maintenance department. "Is there a problem?" Ray asked, setting aside his cleaning cloth. "Just, please come in," Mrs. Pembroke said, holding the door open with an expression Ray couldn't quite read. Inside the oak-paneled office, Headmaster Warner sat behind his massive desk. Beside him stood a tall Asian man in a suit that even Ray could tell cost more than his annual salary. The man radiated authority and intelligence, his posture impeccable, his gaze sharp and assessing. To Ray's surprise, sitting in one of the visitor chairs was Alex, the boy from the library, still wearing Ray's jacket despite the warmth of the office. "Ah, Mr. Jenkins," Headmaster Warner said, rising. "Thank you for joining us. I believe you've informally met Alex Chen." He gestured to the boy, who offered a shy smile. "This is his father, Mr. James Chen." The man stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mr. Jenkins, I've been looking forward to meeting you." Ray wiped his palm surreptitiously on his pants before shaking the offered hand, confusion evident on his face. "Sir," he acknowledged, uncertain what else to say. "Please, sit down," Mr. Chen said, gesturing to an empty chair as if he, not the headmaster, were hosting this meeting. Once Ray was seated, feeling distinctly out of place in his work uniform, Mr. Chen spoke again. "My son has told me about your kindness during the blizzard, how you gave him your only jacket and left a note." Ray shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't anything special, the boy was cold." "What you don't know," Mr. Chen continued, "is why Alex was in that library alone during a storm, or why he appears to be a scholarship student when I could purchase this entire academy without significant impact to my financial portfolio." Ray blinked, looking between the man and his son. Alex spoke up, his voice quiet but clear. "I asked my father if I could attend school without anyone knowing who he was. I wanted to see what it was like to be treated like a normal student, not a walking bank account. My son has attended 3 prestigious academies in the past 2 years, Mr. Chen explained. At each, he was immediately surrounded by friends, interested only in access to our home in the Hamptons or invitations to our gala events. Faculty gave him preferential treatment regardless of his performance. He was learning nothing about the world or himself." The headmaster, looking slightly pale, nodded along as if this had already been explained to him. "So we created a test," Mr. Chen continued. "Alex enrolled as a scholarship student with a fictitious background. I wanted to see how Westfield, an institution that has received considerable donations from my family foundation, would treat a student believed to have no financial advantages." Ray began to understand, his eyes moving to Alex, who still wore the oversized work jacket like a badge of honor. "Most of the faculty failed the test," Alex said softly. "Except for Professor Martinez in mathematics, and you, Mr. Jenkins. You didn't even know I was awake when you put your jacket over me. You just did it because it was the right thing to do." Mr. Chen leaned forward, his expression serious, yet animated with a purpose that seemed to energize the air around him. "Mr. Jenkins, I've spent the past 2 days learning everything I could about you. 27 years at Westfield, consistently excellent performance reviews, a daughter who teaches elementary school in Ohio, a wife lost to cancer, countless small kindnesses noticed by few but appreciated by many." Ray shifted uncomfortably under the weight of this unexpected scrutiny. "Sir, I'm just doing my job." "No," Mr. Chen said firmly. "What you're just doing is showing more character and humanity than most of the people I deal with who earn 7-figure salaries. He glanced briefly at Headmaster Warner, whose forced smile suggested he understood the implied criticism. "I have a proposition for you," Mr. Chen continued. "I'm establishing a new position at Westfield Academy, Director of Character Education and Community Service. This person will develop programs that teach students the values conspicuously missing from their current education: empathy, humility, appreciation for all types of work and workers." Ray stared, uncomprehending. "And you're telling me this because I'm offering you the position," Mr. Chen stated simply. The words hung in the air like an impossible equation. Ray looked to the headmaster, expecting contradiction, but found only resigned confirmation. He then turned to Alex, who was smiling broadly. "That's crazy," Ray finally managed. "I'm a janitor. I don't have teaching credentials. I never even finished college myself." "Which makes you uniquely qualified," Mr. Chen replied. "You have something more valuable than credentials: lived experience and moral clarity. The position comes with a salary commensurate with senior faculty, an apartment on campus, and a budget for program development." Ray's mind reeled. The salary alone would change everything. He could help Melissa with her mortgage, afford to visit his grandchildren more than once a year, maybe even retire someday with dignity instead of necessity. Yet doubt crept in, as familiar and heavy as his cleaning cart. The parents and board would never accept someone like me in a position like that. "The Chen Family Foundation is doubling its annual contribution to Westfield," Mr. Chen replied smoothly. "The board has already approved the position and appointment." He slid a folder across the desk. "These are letters from faculty, staff, and students who have benefited from your kindness over the years. We collected them in less than 24 hours. There are 37. Ray's hands trembled as he opened the folder. Notes from cafeteria workers he'd helped during busy periods. A letter from a former scholarship student who remembered the mysteriously appearing granola bars during exam weeks. A card from a teacher who'd noticed Ray staying late to make special accommodations for a student in a wheelchair. "I don't know what to say," Ray whispered. "Say yes," Alex urged, speaking up. "I've been at 3 schools where everyone teaches us about success, but nobody teaches us about goodness." Ray looked down at his hands, calloused, lined, stained from years of cleaning chemicals. Could these same hands help shape young minds? Could his simple wisdom compete with advanced degrees and published research? Then he remembered Melissa's face when he'd told her to drop out of college, and her stubborn refusal. "Sometimes, Dad," she'd said, "the people who think they don't deserve a chance are exactly the ones who should get one." Ray straightened his shoulders and met Mr. Chen's expectant gaze. "I'd need to finish my degree. I owe that to my daughter, and to these kids." "Mr. Ha," Chen smiled. "Already arranged. Night classes at Westridge Community College, tuition covered." "Then yes," Ray said, his voice finding new strength. "I'll do it. Not because I think I'm qualified, but because these kids deserve to learn what can't be found in textbooks." Headmaster Warner cleared his throat, clearly adapting to the new reality. "Well then, shall we discuss the details of your transition, Mr. Jenkins?" For the first time in decades, Ray felt visible, truly seen for who he was rather than the uniform he wore. "Yes," he said, "I believe we shall." 6 months later, Westfield Academy had transformed in subtle but significant ways. The maintenance wing, once relegated to a basement corner, now housed the Office of Character Education and Community Service, a bright space with walls covered in community project plans and service opportunities. Students moved in and out freely, consulting with the man who still insisted they call him Ray, despite his new title and the diploma now progressing steadily toward completion. On this particular spring afternoon, Ray stood watching from the edge of the Academy's immaculate lawn as a remarkable scene unfolded. 40 Westfield students in their expensive uniforms worked alongside local public school children, planting a community garden in what had once been an unused corner of campus. Among them was Alex Chen, kneeling in the dirt, patiently showing a young girl how to create a proper hole for a tomato seedling. "Quite a change from the library that night, isn't it?" came a voice beside him. Ray turned to find James Chen, as impeccably dressed as always despite the casual setting. "Mr. Chen, I didn't know you were visiting today." "James, please," the man corrected with a smile. "I came to see the opening of the garden. Alex talks about nothing else in our weekly calls." Together they watched as students who once wouldn't acknowledge cleaning staff now worked side by side with children. from backgrounds they would never have encountered in their privileged bubbles. Laughter rang across the garden as a soccer ball was produced, impromptu teams formed, and expensive shoes were abandoned in favor of feeling grass between toes. "You've done remarkable things here, Ray," James said quietly. "The board reports that disciplinary issues are down 40%. Applications for community service opportunities have a waiting list. 3 other prep schools have inquired about replicating your program." Ray shook his head, still not entirely comfortable with praise. Kids want to be good. They just need permission and example. A commotion near the garden drew their attention. A small boy had fallen, bloodying his knee. Before any adult could intervene, Alex was there, pulling a first aid kit from his backpack, gently cleaning the wound while keeping up a steady stream of reassuring conversation. James watched his son with unconcealed pride. "He wants to study medicine now. Says he wants to help people who don't have access to proper care." Ray nodded, remembering the asthma medication he'd spotted that snowy night. "He'll be good at it. He's got the heart for it." A car pulled into the parking lot, and Ray's face lit up with recognition. A woman stepped out, Melissa, Ray's daughter, visiting from Ohio. Beside her, his grandchildren tumbled excitedly from the back seat, eager to see the grandfather who now lived close enough for regular visits. "There's my family," Ray said, a new confidence in his voice. "Would you like to meet them?" James Chen, billionaire and titan of industry, smiled at the janitor-turned-educator who had taught his son what no amount of money could buy. "I would be honored, Ray. Truly honored. Sometimes the most profound lessons come from those we've been taught not to see, the people who move through our world maintaining the spaces we take for granted, whose wisdom is earned through lives very different from our own. In the hallways and classrooms of privilege, true education might not be found in textbooks or lectures, but in the quiet dignity of those who serve without recognition." For Ray Jenkins and the Chen family, a simple act of kindness, a weathered jacket placed over sleeping shoulders, became the catalyst for transformation that rippled outward, touching countless lives in ways neither could have imagined. A janitor found his true calling as a teacher of character, while a wealthy family rediscovered what truly matters in education and in life. Perhaps the most valuable lessons are taught not through words, but through actions. In those moments when we believe no one is watching, when kindness is offered without expectation of return or recognition, these are the moments that reveal our true character, that teach by example what no curriculum can convey. And you witnessing this story, when was the last time you truly saw the invisible people who make your world possible? Perhaps today is the day to look again with new eyes,